Dust rises as 40 recruits stand at attention. Master Sergeant Redgrave towers over a female recruit, his voice cutting through the morning air as he mocks her smaller frame. Without warning, he grabs her by the collar and slams her face into the dirt. Some recruits laugh nervously, others look away. But what happens next stuns everyone. Her hands plant firmly in the earth as she rises with unexpected precision, executing a perfect counter move that leaves the towering drill sergeant pinned and humiliated before the entire formation. No one will ever doubt her again. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you appreciate stories of courage and justice, consider subscribing to join our community. Fort Garrison Military Training Base stands like a fortress against the harsh landscape, all concrete and steel under a threatening gray sky. Dawn breaks with brutal efficiency as 40 recruits form perfect lines on the dusty training ground, breath visible in the cold morning air. Instructors move between formations with practiced intimidation, voices carrying across the open space. Among the recruits stands Briar Merrick, shoulders slightly smaller than those around her, posture military perfect despite visible exhaustion. Her face remains partially obscured beneath her helmet, but what can be seen reveals calm determination rather than the fear or nervous aggression displayed by those around her. Master Sergeant Thorne Redgrave stalks between the formations, like a predator assessing potential prey. His reputation precedes him, the instructor who produces the best soldiers by breaking them first. Other training officers defer to him, with a mixture of respect and subtle unease, creating a buffer zone wherever he moves. Today's proving ground exercise separates the soldiers from the civilians still wearing uniforms, Redgrave announces, voice carrying without needing to shout. His cold eyes deliberately linger on the female recruits as he adds, "We're not in the business of lowering standards to accommodate those who don't belong." The obstacle course stretches before them, each station designed to push human endurance past reasonable limits. During equipment check, Redgrave finds an insignificant fault with Briar's gear. He empties her pack methodically in front of the entire platoon, inspecting and criticizing each perfectly packed item, while recruits with visible infractions stand untouched. "Problem with attention to detail, Merrick?" he asks, tossing her meticulously folded gear into the dirt. "Details get soldiers killed." Briar maintains perfect composure, eyes forward, responding only with a regulation, "Yes, Sergeant," that somehow irritates Redgrave further. The other recruits exchange glances, recognizing the beginning of a targeted campaign they've seen before. During the morning exercises, fellow recruit Zephyr Watts whispers to another recruit while filling canteens. "Merrick's got Redgrave's attention. Poor thing will be gone by weekend." "What's her story anyway?" the other recruit asks. "Nobody knows, keeps to herself, not the worst, not the best. Just there." Zephyr shrugs. But Redgrave's got a talent for finding the ones who don't belong, especially the women. The obstacle course proceeds with mechanical efficiency until Briar reaches the wall climb. Her first attempt falls short, hands slipping on the rain-slick wood. Before she can reset, Redgrave materializes behind her like a summoned demon. "Problem with gravity, Merrick? Or just problem with being where you don't belong?" His voice carries deliberately, ensuring maximum audience for her failure. Briar rises without responding, eyes revealing not panic or shame, but something closer to the tactical assessment. Her second attempt shows unexpected technique, different from how recruits are taught but equally effective. She completes the obstacle, slower than others, but with precision that suggests prior training. Redgrave notices the discrepancy, his expression shifting from dismissal to something sharper, more suspicious. In the mess hall that evening, Briar sits alone until Aurora Pike slides onto the bench across from her. Aurora's face shows fatigue beyond normal training exhaustion, fresh bruises peeking from beneath her uniform collar, the telltale signs of extra training sessions that some female recruits mysteriously require. "You're handling him better than most," Aurora offers quietly. Briar studies her briefly. "I'm not handling anything, just doing what's required." "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Last three who got Redgrave's special attention didn't make it past week 5. Their conversation ends abruptly when Redgrave appears at the table, singling out Aurora for alleged uniform violations that require immediate correction. As Aurora leaves her meal untouched, she drops a small photo that slides beneath the table. Breyer retrieves it discreetly, glancing at the image. Aurora standing proudly with another female soldier in graduation attire, both smiling with accomplishment. Something in Breyer's expression changes subtly upon seeing this, a momentary crack in her carefully maintained neutral facade, suggesting personal connection to the scene that transcends ordinary recruit empathy. By week 6 of training, Redgrave's targeting of Breyer has become obvious to everyone. Her pack is consistently heavier, her duties extended, criticisms constant regardless of performance. Yet, she maintains middle of pack standing, never excelling enough to escape notice, never failing enough to be legitimately removed. During morning combat readiness drills, Redgrave selects Breyer to demonstrate proper defensive techniques. What follows is less demonstration than public humiliation, as he repeatedly throws her to the ground with excessive force, each time mockingly asking if she's really trying or ready to quit yet. Between demonstrations, he circles her like a predator. I looked into your background, Merrick. Failed attempt at officer candidate school. Psychological fitness evaluation that raised questions about stress tolerance. The information is accurate but deliberately twisted, designed to undermine her confidence before her peers. What Redgrave doesn't notice, but Lieutenant Marlo Solari, observing from the sidelines, does, is Breyer's instinctive counter to one of his takedown moves. For just a moment, her body positions for an advanced technique before she visibly catches herself, allowing him to complete the throw. Solari's eyes narrow, attention fully engaged now. That evening, Redgrave announces a special night training exercise for Breyer's squad, punishment for their collective failure to meet standards. The exercise involves carrying heavy equipment through muddy terrain under punishing conditions clearly designed to break their unity and spirit. 3 hours into the grueling march, when recruit Danner collapses from exhaustion, Breyer takes his equipment burden without hesitation. The extra weight would challenge even the strongest recruits, but she adjusts her stance and continues without complaint. Other squad members, inspired by her quiet resilience, begin working together more effectively, creating a cohesion Redgrave clearly didn't expect. His tactics grow increasingly aggressive in response, pushing boundaries between legitimate training and targeted harassment. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Solari discreetly photographs Breyer during training and runs the image through military databases. The search returns no matches, deepening her suspicion. She begins reviewing Breyer's application paperwork, finding subtle inconsistencies in background verification that most would overlook. The tension between Breyer and Redgrave reaches new heights during the final qualification exercise before graduation. The sergeant announces only 80% will pass, guaranteeing some will fail regardless of actual performance. During the mud crawl under barbed wire, he singles out Breyer, placing his boot heavily on her back to hold her face down in muddy water well beyond safe limits. The other recruits watch with growing discomfort, recognizing the line between tough training and something else being crossed. When he finally releases pressure, Breyer surfaces gasping and mud-covered. Redgrave leans down and whispers something only she can hear. Whatever he says transforms her expression completely. The controlled determination she's maintained for weeks vanishes, replaced by something cold and focused. Not just determination, but purpose. The change is subtle, but unmistakable to those paying attention. Lieutenant Solari, watching from distance, sees everything. She speaks quietly into her radio. It's time. Prepare the documentation. The combat training pit sits at the center of Fort Garrison like an ancient arena. Sand filled and surrounded by elevated standing positions. It serves as both practical training ground and symbolic space where recruits prove themselves before their peers. Today, the entire training company surrounds the pit in formation, an unusual assembly that creates an atmosphere of anticipation. Master Sergeant Redgrave stands at the center, explaining the day's final evaluation demonstration that will determine which recruits continue to graduation and which wash out. His eyes find Breyer in formation. Recruit Merrick, center pit. Breyer steps forward with regulation precision, facing Redgrave with the same neutral expression she's maintained throughout training. But those watching closely might notice the difference in her stance, subtle shifts in weight distribution and hand position that suggest readiness beyond basic training. This exercise determines if you have what it takes to represent this training company. Redgrave announces, circling her like a boxer seeking opening moves. Combat effectiveness under pressure is non-negotiable. What begins as standard combat demonstration quickly escalates as Redgrave uses techniques and force beyond training parameters. The other instructors exchange uncomfortable glances but say nothing, bound by unwritten rules about challenging a senior NCO's methods. The demonstration becomes increasingly one-sided until Redgrave grabs Briar and slams her face first into the dirt before the entire formation. Some recruits gasp, others laugh nervously, while most stand frozen in uncomfortable silence. Dust rises around Briar's prone form as Redgrave places a knee against her back, leaning down to speak so only she can hear. "This is where you quit, Merrick, like your pathetic sister should have before she took the coward's way out." The words hang between them for one suspended moment. Then Briar plants her hands in the dirt and pushes upward with controlled fury that transforms her entire being. In one precise sequence of movements that could only come from advanced combat training, she breaks Redgrave's grip, executes a perfect counter technique, and pins him firmly, but without causing injury. The move is so smoothly professional that several instructors instinctively step forward in recognition before catching themselves. The formation stands in shocked silence until Lieutenant Solari steps through the ranks, voice carrying with calm authority. "Captain Briar Merrick, Special Operations Combat Instructor, stand down." The words land like artillery among the recruits. Briar releases Redgrave and stands at attention, confirming her true rank with a crisp, "Yes, Lieutenant." Redgrave scrambles to his feet, face contorted with rage and humiliation. "What the hell is this?" Lieutenant Solari addresses the stunned formation. Captain Merrick was deployed undercover following multiple reports of unauthorized physical abuse and targeted harassment of female recruits at Fort Garrison. Her findings will be presented directly to the base commander. She gestures to concealed positions around the training, ground where cameras have documented weeks of systematic abuses beyond acceptable training standards. Aurora Pike steps forward from formation, followed by 3 other female recruits, finally willing to testify about special training sessions that crossed into physical assault. "This is ridiculous," Redgrave sputters. "These women weren't meeting standards. Everything I did was approved training protocol." Was holding recruit Merrick's face underwater until she nearly lost consciousness approved protocol? Solari asks coldly. Was informing her you knew about her sister's suicide and using it as psychological warfare approved protocol? The base commander, Colonel Ursa Wyndham, arrives with military police, having watched the final confrontation remotely. Her expression reveals controlled fury as she orders Redgrave's immediate suspension pending investigation. "You're making a mistake," Redgrave protests. "I've produced more combat-ready soldiers than any instructor on this base. I maintain necessary standards while others soften them." "The standard is excellence, not abuse, Sergeant," Colonel Wyndham responds, her voice carrying the weight of decades of service. "Discipline builds soldiers. Cruelty breaks them. You've forgotten the difference." As Redgrave is escorted away, the training company remains at attention, processing the revelation that has transformed their understanding of the past 6 weeks. In the commander's office later, Briar explains her personal motivation while changing into her proper uniform with captain's insignia. "My sister Sorrel was a recruit at Fort Dalton 2 years ago. She reported similar abuse through proper channels, but her complaints were buried. When she tried to request transfer, she was subjected to escalating harassment until she took her own life." She places a file on the colonel's desk. The pattern repeats across multiple training facilities. Targeted abuse of female recruits, systematic burial of complaints, instructors transferred rather than disciplined when issues become too obvious to ignore. Colonel Wyndham reviews the documentation with growing concern. "How did you get authorization for this operation? This crosses jurisdictional boundaries between commands." "I didn't, initially," Briar admits. "I began gathering evidence independently after my sister's death. When I had enough to establish pattern behavior, I approached General Hargrove at Central Command. He authorized the undercover operation off books to prevent interference from within the chain of command. Later that day, Colonel Wyndham formally addresses the recruit formation, acknowledging the leadership failure that allowed the abuse to continue. "The military's greatest strength is not our weapons or technology, but our people. How we train them reflects who we are as an institution and as a nation. She gestures Breyer forward, now dressed in her proper uniform with captain's rank. Captain Merrick's actions remind us that true courage includes standing against injustice, even when that injustice wears the same uniform you do. The entire formation, instructors and recruits, render a formal salute acknowledging Breyer's service and sacrifice. For many of the female recruits, it's the first time they've witnessed such clear recognition that their treatment was wrong and that someone with authority finally believed them. 3 months later, graduation day arrives for the recruits of Training Company Echo. The ceremony takes place on the same grounds where they have struggled and grown, but the atmosphere has transformed. Colonel Wyndham presides with Captain Breyer Merrick, now openly serving as training officer, watching with quiet pride as Aurora Pike and others receive their insignia. "The soldiers before you today have been tested beyond measure," Colonel Wyndham announces to the assembled families and officers, "not just by the rigorous standards we rightfully demand, but by flaws in our own system that they helped expose and correct." She continues with formal announcement of new oversight protocols and reporting systems being implemented across all basic training facilities following the investigation's findings. Several other instructors from different bases have been removed from duty, creating institutional change that extends far beyond Fort Garrison. After the ceremony, Aurora approaches Breyer, extending her hand formally before shifting to a heartfelt embrace. "Thank you for believing us when nobody else would," she says, voice thick with emotion. "You did the hard part," Breyer responds. "Standing up after being knocked down takes more courage than most, understand." Aurora reaches into her pocket and returns the photo Breyer had retrieved months earlier. We now see it clearly, Breyer with her sister Sorrel in graduation attire before tragedy struck. The resemblance between the sisters is striking, explaining why Breyer's presence had unsettled Redgrave from the beginning. "She would be proud of what you did," Aurora tells her, "and what you're continuing to do." Breyer has been assigned as the new head of combat instruction, tasked with rebuilding the program with emphasis on rigorous standards without abuse. Her first action implements anonymous reporting systems and regular psychological evaluations of instructors, changes that will protect future recruits from experiencing what her sister endured. In her first training session under the new command, Breyer demonstrates proper technique with respect and precision. The recruits, both male and female, show equal dedication. The toxic environment replaced by demanding but fair standards that actually produce better results. The objective of training isn't to destroy and rebuild, she explains to her instructors during their preparation meeting. It's to reveal the strength that's already there and forge it into something dependable. Fear has limited utility in creating soldiers who think clearly under pressure. Later that week, Breyer visits a military cemetery where her sister is buried. The headstone reveals her name, Sorrel Merrick, with dates showing she was only 21 when she died. Breyer places newly earned graduation insignia against the stone, fulfilling a promise made 2 years earlier. "It's done, Sorrel," she says quietly. "Not just for you, but for all of them. The system is changing." As Breyer leaves the cemetery, she passes a group of new female recruits arriving for processing. One looks nervous, reminiscent of how Sorrel appeared in photos before her training began. Breyer gives her a simple nod of encouragement that visibly strengthens the young woman's resolve. The changes initiated at Fort Garrison spread throughout the training command. A brief montage shows other military facilities implementing what have become known as the Merrick Standards for instructor oversight. What began as one officer's undercover mission has expanded into systemic reform that will protect generations of recruits. In the final scene, Breyer stands before a new class of combat instructors, both male and female, selected not just for technical proficiency, but for their understanding of effective leadership. On the wall behind her hangs a simple framed quote, "Strength builds, abuse breaks. Know the difference. The standards we uphold define us more than the standards we demand of others," she tells them. "Your task is not to weed out the weak, but to reveal strength in those who haven't yet discovered it in themselves. That's the difference between an instructor and a leader." As she continues speaking, the camera pulls back to show the full scope of positive change her actions have created. A training environment that demands excellence through method rather than fear, and a new generation of instructors committed to upholding both standards and dignity. In her office later, Colonel Wyndham presents Breyer with official orders expanding her role to training oversight across multiple facilities. "Your sister's death could have been just another statistic," the colonel says solemnly. "Instead, you've transformed it into a legacy that will protect countless others. That's the highest form of service." Breyer accepts the orders with characteristic composure, but her eyes reveal the emotional weight of the journey from personal grief to institutional change. She glances at her sister's photo on her desk before responding. "Sorrel always said the measure of a soldier isn't how well they fight, but what they choose to fight for." She meets the colonel's gaze with quiet determination. This was always her fight, too. 6 months after the Redgrave incident, Breyer receives notice that the formal investigation into Fort Dalton has concluded. The results validate what she had long known, that her sister's reports of abuse had been deliberately buried and that her death should have been prevented. 3 senior officers are facing disciplinary action, and the commanding officer who dismissed Sorrel's complaints has been removed from leadership positions permanently. The validation brings a complex mixture of emotions, closure tempered with the knowledge that justice arrived too late for Sorrel. Yet the ripple effects of that justice continue to spread throughout the system. At the monthly review meeting, training statistics from across all bases implementing the new standards show something the old guard had claimed impossible: higher graduation rates alongside improved performance metrics. The focus on legitimate training, rather than arbitrary hardship, has produced more qualified soldiers while reducing washout rates due to injury and psychological distress. "The data speaks for itself," Breyer explains to the review committee. "Excellence and abuse have never been synonymous. We've simply replaced an outdated method with one that actually achieves our stated objectives. Only a few voices of resistance remain, mostly from instructors of Redgrave's generation, who insist that modern recruits are being coddled. Their arguments find less traction with each passing month as performance data continues to prove them wrong. Word of the changes has spread beyond military circles. Civilian oversight committees that once criticized military training methods now point to the Merrick standards as a model of institutional reform. Recruitment numbers for female candidates have increased by 20%, bringing valuable skills and perspectives that had previously been lost to a toxic culture. On the anniversary of her sister's death, Breyer receives an unexpected visitor. General Hargrove, the officer who had authorized her undercover operation, arrives without ceremony to her office. "I came to see firsthand what you've built," he explains, "and to tell you that similar reforms are being implemented across all branches. The Joint Chiefs have taken notice." He hands her a formal commendation, recognition at the highest levels for her service. But more meaningful to Breyer is what he says next. "Your sister's name is being added to the memorial wall at the academy, not as a training casualty, but as the catalyst for reform that will save countless lives. She didn't die in combat, but her death has served this country nonetheless." Later that evening, in the quiet of her quarters, Breyer opens a box containing Sorrel's personal effects, finally returned from Fort Dalton. Among them is her sister's journal, its pages filled with observations about training, notations about the abuses she witnessed and experienced, and her growing determination to find a way to change the system from within. The final entry, written the night before her death, contains a passage that catches Breyer's breath. "If they succeed in silencing me, I hope someone else will speak louder. The uniform deserves better than the men dishonoring it this way." Breyer closes the journal gently. "We spoke, Sorrel, and they finally heard us." The following morning brings a new class of recruits to Fort Garrison. As they form their first uncertain formations, they see a training cadre that looks different from what they might have expected. Diverse in gender and background, unified in purpose. The fear that many brought with them, based on military training stereotypes, gives way to something more productive, the understanding that they will be challenged but not broken. Captain Merrick addresses them directly, her presence commanding respect without requiring intimidation. "Look to your left and right," she instructs them. "The people standing beside you are not your competition. They are your responsibility. Your strength will be measured not by how much pain you can endure alone, but by how effectively you can function as part of something larger than yourself." Among the recruits stands a young woman with a familiar, determined expression. the same one Breyer had nodded to outside the cemetery months earlier. Now she stands tall, already showing signs of the leader she might become if given the right guidance. The cycle continues, but differently now. Where once there was a system that too often confused cruelty with necessary hardship, there now stands something more worthy of the uniform it serves. Not a softened version of military training, but a more effective one, producing soldiers who understand that true strength includes moral courage, and that leadership requires wisdom alongside authority. And somewhere in that transformed system, Sorrel Merrick's spirit lives on, her final wish fulfilled beyond what she could have imagined. The sister who carried her memory forward watches a new generation prepare to serve, knowing they will face challenges, but not abuse, that they will be pushed to excellence without being pushed to breaking. The uniform, at last, is being honored by those who wear it at every rank. 1 year after the Redgrave incident, Fort Garrison hosts a ceremony unlike any in its history. The training ground where recruits once faced systematic abuse has been transformed into a space of recognition. Rows of chairs face a small stage where Colonel Wyndham stands behind a podium, addressing an audience of military personnel, government officials, and families. Today we dedicate the Sorrel Merrick Training Ethics Center, she announces, gesturing to the new building behind her. This facility will serve as both a training hub for instructors across all branches and a constant reminder that our methods must reflect our values. Breyer sits in the front row, her composure perfect as always, though those who know her well can see the emotion she contains. The building bears her sister's name, transforming a painful memory into an enduring legacy. After the ceremony, Aurora Pike, now a sergeant herself assigned to training oversight, approaches Breyer. "The recruits have a nickname for you, you know," she says with a small smile. The Steel Rose, tough enough to withstand anything but still insistent on proper form. Breyer raises an eyebrow. "I've been called worse." "They mean it with respect," Aurora clarifies. "The highest compliment they have. The training is still demanding, but they know it's fair. They know someone's watching to make sure lines aren't crossed." That evening, in her office at the newly dedicated center, Breyer reviews applications for the next instructor certification program. The reforms have expanded beyond Fort Garrison to become military-wide policy, but implementation requires continuous oversight. Too many in leadership positions still quietly believe that abuse builds character, that psychological breaking is necessary for military function. A knock at her door interrupts her work. Lieutenant Colonel Marceau, visiting from another training command, enters with the stiff formality of someone uncomfortable with his assignment. "Captain Merrick, I've been sent to discuss concerns about the practical application of these new protocols," he begins, remaining standing despite her gesture toward a chair. "Some commands find them overly restrictive." "Restrictive of what specifically?" Breyer asks, her tone professionally neutral. "Instructors feel unable to properly motivate recruits. Discipline issues are increasing in some units. There's concern we're creating softer soldiers." Breyer accesses her computer terminal, pulling up training statistics across all bases since implementation of the new standards. Performance metrics across all measurable categories have improved by an average of 17%, she notes. Graduation rates are up, while injury rates are down. Most importantly, combat readiness evaluations show significant improvement. "Statistics can be interpreted various ways," Marceau counters dismissively. "Then perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing." Breyer stands. "Your command is implementing the protocols next month. I'd like to conduct a comparative exercise, your current methods against ours, with objective evaluation of results." "That seems reasonable," Marceau agrees, clearly expecting to prove his point. 3 weeks later, Fort Carson hosts the comparative training exercise. 2 groups of 30 recruits, matched for physical ability and aptitude, undergo parallel training tracks, one using traditional high-pressure methods, the other following the Merrick standards. Military observers from all branches, alongside civilian oversight committee members, evaluate the process and results. By day 5, differences are already apparent. While both groups show similar physical performance, the psychological differences are striking. The traditional group displays high stress indicators, internal competition rather than cooperation, and diminished problem-solving abilities under pressure. The Merrick Standards Group demonstrates better team cohesion, information retention, and adaptability to changing scenarios. This isn't about making training easier, Breyer explains to the observer panel. It's about making it more effective. Psychological stress has utility in training, but only when it serves a specific purpose beyond breaking spirit. We're not eliminating pressure, we're applying it with precision rather than blanket cruelty. The final evaluation involves a complex tactical scenario requiring both physical performance and decision-making under pressure. The traditional group approaches it with exhausted determination, individuals pushing through pain but struggling to coordinate effectively. The Merrick Standards Group displays something more valuable: disciplined teamwork and clear communication even under extreme fatigue. The results silence even the most skeptical observers. Not only does the Merrick Standards Group complete the challenge faster, they demonstrate superior tactical decision-making, fewer errors, and more effective casualty management. Most tellingly, their after-action self-assessment identifies more learning points and improvement opportunities, showing deeper engagement with the training purpose. Colonel Wyndham, who had traveled to observe the demonstration, stands beside Breyer as the final data is presented to the Oversight Committee. The evidence is conclusive, the committee chair announces. The Merrick Standards produce superior training outcomes across all measured parameters. Full implementation across all branches will proceed as scheduled. As the observers disperse, Lieutenant Colonel Marceau approaches Breyer with reluctant respect. "I was prepared to dismiss this as political correctness undermining military necessity," he admits. "I was wrong." "It was never about making training easier," Breyer responds. "It was about making it purposeful. Every challenge should build something specific, not just test general breaking points." Back at Fort Garrison, the changes continue to evolve and strengthen. The anonymous reporting system has become a model adopted beyond military training, implemented in other high-stress environments like emergency services and law enforcement academies. What began as a mission to expose one abusive instructor has grown into a fundamental reconsideration of how authority operates in hierarchical systems. In her expanded role overseeing ethics implementation, Breyer travels to Fort Dalton, where her sister's story began. The base has changed dramatically since Sorrell's time, new leadership and protocols transforming its culture. Yet entering the grounds still triggers memories for Breyer, imagining her sister's experience through the letters and journal entries she left behind. The base commander, Colonel Farrah Quinn, greets Breyer personally. "Your work has changed everything," she says as they walk the grounds. "I was an instructor here when your sister was a recruit. Not directly involved with her training, but I knew something was wrong with how certain instructors operated." "Why didn't anyone intervene?" Breyer asks, the question that has haunted her for years. Fear, institutional inertia, the belief that speaking up would change nothing while risking everything. Quinn's expression shows genuine regret. "I've asked myself that question every day since implementing your protocols and seeing how simple it would have been to create proper oversight." They stop at the training field, where Sorrell once struggled under abuse disguised as instruction. Now, it hosts recruits engaged in demanding but purposeful exercises, instructors providing firm correction without humiliation or cruelty. "She should have trained under these conditions," Breyer says quietly. "Yes," Quinn agrees simply, "and countless others before her. We can't change that history, but we've ensured it doesn't repeat." That evening, Breyer conducts a closed session with Fort Dalton's instructors, answering questions about implementation challenges and reviewing specific scenarios. One instructor, clearly still resistant to the changes, challenges her directly. "These recruits will face enemies who don't follow ethical guidelines," he argues. "We do them no favors by sheltering them from harsh realities." "Preparing someone for difficult circumstances doesn't require abusing them," Breyer responds evenly. "The difference between hardship training and abuse isn't the difficulty level, it's the purpose and method. Breaking someone down to rebuild them in a specific image is not the same as building them up to handle whatever comes. Our enemies will try to break our soldiers. We shouldn't do their work for them." The instructor falls silent, not necessarily convinced but unable to counter her logic. Other instructors nod in agreement, many having seen firsthand how the new methods produce more capable soldiers. 2 years to the day after her undercover mission began, Breyer receives notification of her promotion to major, along with a new assignment. She will head the newly established Military Training Ethics Division at the Pentagon, overseeing standards implementation across all service branches. The promotion ceremony takes place at Fort Garrison, where everything began. Colonel Wyndham, now Brigadier General Wyndham, performs the ceremony with Aurora Pike and other graduates of that pivotal training class in attendance. Major Merrick's contributions extend beyond exposing specific abuses, Wyndham states during the ceremony. She has fundamentally reformed how we understand the relationship between challenge and growth, between authority and responsibility. The results speak for themselves, a stronger, more capable fighting force built on respect rather than fear. After receiving her new rank insignia, Breyer addresses the assembled personnel. This promotion honors not just my work, but the courage of every recruit who endured, reported, and helped change a broken system. Most especially, it honors my sister Sorrel, whose life should have been saved by the very reforms her death inspired. Later, alone at Sorrel's grave, Breyer places her major's insignia briefly against the headstone before pinning it to her uniform. "You outrank me still," she says softly to her sister's memory. "What you started with a single report that no one heeded has transformed an entire institution." The final scene shows Breyer entering her new office at the Pentagon, walls still bare except for two items. The framed quote, "Strength builds. Abuse breaks. Know the difference?" And beside it, a photograph of Sorrel in her uniform, smile bright with the idealism that the system had once betrayed but now honors. On her desk lies a thick folder, the next challenge already waiting. Reports of similar systematic problems in military medical training programs. The work continues, transforming one corner of the institution at a time, replacing cultures of fear with cultures of excellence. Breyer opens the folder and begins reading, her expression showing the same quiet determination that once carried her through undercover training. The systems that resist change are powerful, entrenched in tradition and protected by those who confuse cruelty with necessity. But she has proven that even the most established systems can be reformed when their failures are exposed to light. Outside her office window, new recruits march across the grounds of the Pentagon's ceremonial entrance. Among them are faces that would never have made it through the old system, individuals whose unique strengths might have been crushed by standardized braking. Now they move forward in formation, their diversity of background and approach recognized as strength rather than weakness in a military that has begun to understand that true power comes not from uniformity, but from unity of purpose. The recruit who catches Breyer's attention marches at the front of the formation, a young woman with the same determined expression Sorrel showed in her graduation photo. Different face, different name, but carrying forward the same spirit that once believed the system could be better than it was. And now, because of one officer who refused to accept that abuse was necessary for strength, it is.